Welcome to Tanversations. I'm Tanya, a 20-something working in venture capital and excited about the Web3 space. In this podcast, I'm going to be diving into the biggest questions that I have, mostly about work, but also about life and everything in between, by turning to my elders that include venture capitalists, experts, entrepreneurs, writers, philosophers, activists, and even 26-year-olds. So grab your pumpkin spice lattes, kombucha, iced coffee, and 16th other beverage as we go through these conversations together. My guest for today is Karuna Rawal, the lead strategist of the Like a Girl campaign that won an Emmy Award and 14 Lions at the Cannes Film Festival in 2015. Karuna started her career in marketing for financial services, but very quickly moved to P&G, where she worked for 10 years. After that, she moved to Leo Burnett, where she worked on the infamous ad for P&G Always Like a Girl campaign that won over 40 industry awards, including Emmy for Outstanding Commercial, Global Effies, Grand Clio, and D&AD Black Pencil. She is currently the CMO and CRO of Nature's Fynd. Nature's Fynd is a Chicago-based food tech company that is creating Fynd, an alternative protein to feed the world's growing population while also nurturing the planet. The company was born out of research conducted for NASA on microbes in Yellowstone National Park. The company's fermentation technology produces a complete vegan protein using only a fraction of the resources required by traditional agriculture. The company has raised $500 million to date and was Chicago's 10th unicorn for 2021. So, hi, Karna. Thank you so much for taking out the time. And, it's really great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'd love to start off with your journey and, just talk a little bit more about your path, how you got into marketing and up till now when you're at Nature's Fynd.
Well, it's a long journey, but I'll be happy to share it. So I actually got into marketing very early because it was something I always, even coming out of undergraduate, I really wanted to pursue marketing. So I actually started my career, I had a business undergrad in finance and marketing and started my career in financial services marketing. So I worked for a life insurance company in New York, but on the marketing side. So I worked on marketing, financial services, and enjoyed that, but realized I loved the marketing, not so much the financial services. So went back to business school at Kellogg to focus on marketing and was specifically interested in consumer products. So did that. Was fortunate enough to get a internship at P&G and then led to a full-time job. So I started really my marketing career in P&G on the food and beverage part of the business, which was really a small part of the business is also very entrepreneurial, set of brands, because the company was really focused much more known for the bigger, laundry detergent and soaps and, other parts of the company. But it was a great start to my career. I spent 5 years or so in Cincinnati and then ended up having to relocate to Chicago for my husband's career. But continued on with P&G and took on a new role on the retailer's marketing side. So did customer and shopper marketing, helped the company figure that practice out, and then eventually decided that all roads were leading back to Cincinnati at P&G. So left P&G, was home for some time with my young children, and then really became more of an entrepreneur and started a consulting business in brand innovation and strategy, and that led to a client opportunity on the agency side at Leo Burnett, which eventually turned into a role where I joined the agency on the strategic planning side. And so I went from kind of being on the client side to being on the agency side. Helped run their strategic planning first in the US and then globally, and then went on to run the shopper agency at Leo Burnett, and eventually was part of Publicis Group, which was the holding company. So ran some very big businesses, including P&G, helped win the Walmart business, ran Aldi, and then eventually decided after 9 years that I was looking for a new adventure. And I, as part of my time at Leo Burnett, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I worked on a pretty amazing campaign. So that was kind of the highlight, called Like a Girl for Always. And then, decided I wanted to do something back on the client side, and was looking at, my passion has always been in food and beverage. So I was kind of looking the food space, but I also did a lot in innovation. So I was looking for opportunities that would kind of bring those together, and got a call about a company I had never heard of, and that was doing something that sounded pretty remarkable and unique. And it was very much in line with my own values. I'm a lifelong vegetarian. I was vegan for some time. And it was back in food, and a chance to build a company really from nothing, from a blank sheet of paper, as our CEO told me. So it was a big leap of faith that I took to join a startup at this stage of my career. And I've been there as, I came in as the chief marketing officer. I'm now both revenue and marketing officer. I've been there 3.5 years, and we've launched the brand, and I have launched into retail and e-commerce. And so it's been a really, really fun journey. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of my story.
Yeah, no, it's quite a journey. And I think, from when you kind of started with marketing up till now, I feel like it's also evolved quite a bit, right? Like, especially with the internet becoming such a huge part of marketing now versus back then. But do you feel like there are still principles that you kind of, use or hold, regardless of what the medium is when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, so a lot of things have changed, which I think is also part of why in my career, I haven't just been in the same organization, but also in very different roles in very different industries, to continue to kind of learn and broaden my, own capabilities. But I think the one thing that I started with and I continue with is being true to the consumer. Really, ensuring that the consumer is your boss in everything that you do. And that's a principle that I think I learned early on in my career at P&G, and I've carried it with me. And no matter, the channels might change, the technology might change, but at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is build something that creates positive associations, memories, and experiences for for an individual with the brand. And the more you can understand the consumer, the more everything about what matters and how your brand can fit in. So I always talk about, you have to get to the human truth, and then the brand truth, and then see where they intersect. And in there is where there's a lot of richness in how you can communicate, how you can do, and marketing is obviously much more than just the communications part of it. But it is a big part of it, right? As the brand communicates, and then the brand has to live up to its promise. So that part to me has not changed. There's lots of different ways to reach consumers, and that technology keeps changing and advancing. And it's important to know that there's also more and more channels, right? When I started in marketing, it was just, retail was kind of the only game. And now there's so many different ways you can connect with consumers, thinking about owned media and social channels, and everything that's happening in technology is super important. But I keep finding that the truism of, start with the consumer remains true regardless.
Yeah. And just kind of diving a little bit into, from that into the Like a Girl campaign, which is crazy, because I was actually, I think 14 when the campaign came out.
You're making me feel very old.
Yeah, no, not at all. But no, I remember, kind of watching, the video on Facebook, and I was like, it really kind of blew me away. And I was like, wow, like, it's so true the way we kind of embrace these stereotypes. And even for me, like as a girl, I had these stereotypes about my own gender, and I went to an all-girls school, and I remember we had like lots of discussions and things like that on this campaign when it came out. And yeah, I'd also kind of love to know, what was your thought process when you were kind of coming up with it, and what was the story behind it?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I actually was not even working on the Always business. So I was at Leo Burnett, and Always was a client. And we got a call one day from our global CEO. I got a call from a global CEO saying, we need some help on Always. And he wanted to pick, people that had a kind of fresh perspective, had not really worked on the business. But he said, I need my best strategist, my best creative director, and regardless of where they are globally. So I was paired up with global creative director, Judy John, who's an amazing creative and good friend now, but I had never met her before, and also an account director from Toronto. So the three of us were kind of thrown together to try to figure out how do we make this brand that was actually the #1 brand. It had superiority in terms of market share, but what didn't have a connection with the younger generation, and trying to figure out, like, if we're going to make this brand iconic and have it grow, how do we do that? And so we kind of came in with a very fresh perspective. I know there were people that had worked on the business and done a lot of work. And part of my job, I was the lead strategist. So was going in, before the creative could even get started, was really laying out the creative strategy and the insight. And a lot of it was just digging through a lot of consumer data. And interestingly, both the creative director and I had daughters who were around 10, I want to say, at that time. So we personally could see this change that was happening ourselves. It was very personal and connective for us. And then we did some survey work, and we saw that this was something that was happening. Girls were losing their confidence. And then the brand actually had this data in their archives that we just kind of dug out and said, girls lose twice as much confidence as boys at puberty, and it takes forever to gain it back. And we thought, this is really powerful data. And then it was a question of how do you bring that to life? Because if you just say it to people, it's not going to have the same impact as if we could. And our, one of our creative directors, and we had creative teams in London and Toronto and in Chicago all working on it. And when they came up with this idea of, let's not tell people, let's just show them, in real terms. And when that idea, we all got really excited about it. And then when we were able to get the director, Lauren Greenfield, who also had a personal passion for this topic, it really came to life in a way that, none of us could have imagined. I mean, and we knew when we made it that it was pretty powerful, but then to see it, you always hope to do great work and have it, impact the business for sure, but to have it impact culture and impact, globally. I mean, the brand was only willing initially, they were just going to launch it in the US, and then we saw it take off. And then we launched it globally, and it just kept building and building. And it was a pretty amazing story. Part of the journey was we ended up going to Cannes and winning, 14 Cannes Lions. And then also the Titanium, which was the first time, they had awarded that for gender equality, and then went on to win an Emmy in Hollywood. It was pretty crazy, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's the behind the scenes story. A lot of hard work because all of us had day jobs and we had to kind of figure this out. We did it from beginning to when we presented the campaign was about 6 weeks, which was also pretty incredible.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy. And personally, like you mentioned, that you kind of felt that you were that there was like a personal connection for you and the other creative director because of your daughter. But did you feel like when connected with so many people, there was just this kind of sense of accomplishment, and what was also like your daughter's take on it when she kind of saw it?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Like I said, again, you hope to do work that builds the business and impacts the brand, which it definitely did. But to see it take off like that, and I think it was really, all of us who worked on it knew that, when you have an insight that is so, universal, and, that was part of the job I had, was like uncover an insight that's going to be not just relevant in the US, but globally. You had to really go to the human level and say, what is it that girls across the world share? And, what is it that's getting in the way of them continuing to be confident, and, what's happening? And, we kind of listed all the things that were taking away from girls' confidence at that. And part of it was, language, how we say things, how we talk about things, and just all of us just accept it as it's okay. And so when you start to unpack those things, it just became an insight that resonated, across the globe. And no, my kids, I have 3 actually. She's my youngest, but all of them were pretty excited and proud. And it was an incredible feeling. Like I said, it's hard to describe. It was surreal for everything that followed after it. But again, our goal was to really do what we could to, change this, what we felt was a really unjust way. And then the brand went on to do other iterations of the campaign in terms of sports and, other areas where we continue, they continue to build girls' confidence.
Yeah, no, it was so incredible. And I actually remember the exact moment when I watched it as well. So
Do you?
yeah,
That's
that's quite
great.
cool. And then, I think it's so great that I
Yeah.
get to interview you now. So yeah, I think also kind of jumping in and talking a little bit more about what you're working on now. So
Mhm.
what's kind of can you talk a little bit more about Phi and what your kind of big vision is with the company?
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention in your last question, if you don't mind, is I do remember now that one of those moments was when my daughter actually came back and said they were learning about the campaign in school, which is
Yeah.
pretty crazy to have that happen. So yeah, so what I'm doing now is, obviously, as I mentioned, it's also a passion project, right? In terms of I have a huge love for food. I'm a big cook and baker, and I've always loved working on the food brands. But I think what's really important about what I'm doing now is bringing a purpose-driven brand to life, building it from the ground up, and the idea that we can continue eating meat and dairy the way that we've been doing it's just not feasible anymore as our population continues to grow. We have climate change. We're raising, I think, something like 80 billion land animals for consumption year after year, and it's just not something that we can continue to do. So the food system is very, very ingrained, and it needs to change, and we're going to need to find new ways of doing things. And so part of what we're doing at Nature's Fynd is the story is kind of another remarkable story. I'm a big storyteller and brand builder at heart. And so this story really drew me in. And so the story of discovery is actually our chief science officer, when he was a graduate student at Montana State, was doing a project for NASA on extreme forms of life and what kind of conditions need to be true for life to thrive outside of Earth. And that took him to Yellowstone National Park, which is one of the most famous parks in the world, which is actually a super volcano. And there he discovered fungi. So it's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's part of that third kingdom that we all learn about in science. And it turned out to be a pretty remarkable thing. It was 50% protein, 30% fiber, has vitamins and minerals, and has learned to thrive in an environment with very little resources, which, as you think about humanity, that's kind of the world we're facing now, right? We have to figure out, if I want to leave a world for my kids and their kids that's going to be not completely ruined the way that we're going right now, it's important that we all try to do something about it. So from that microbe discovery, the company invented a fermentation method, which allows us to grow this protein in a matter of days in trays, and we can do it anywhere in a warehouse. So we're doing it right now, 10 minutes from downtown Chicago, but we could be in Mumbai, we could be in Singapore. And actually we have, investors from Singapore as well. So there's a lot of interest in the world on how do we grow protein, and especially a space like where you are, where you have to be reliant on food from coming in, being imported. So the ability to grow protein. And then the remarkable thing about it is it's extremely versatile. It can be turned into both meatless and dairy-free foods, which is very unusual. And so we're able to make a large variety of foods for any time of day, with something that is rich in protein, can be easily grown. And the most important thing is, from a sustainability standpoint, it requires 99% less land, 99% less water, and emits only 6% of the greenhouse gas emissions versus beef at scale. So it's a huge, we have a 35,000 square foot facility, and it's the equivalent, if we had to, the amount of protein we're going to create there would require thousands and thousands of acres of land. So it's something that I think the world needs. And so to have the opportunity to build that, and tell the story, obviously it's a complicated story. It's a story of nature and science coming together, but there's some really great storytelling elements in there as well, which is what attracted me. And ultimately, to make the world a better place is kind of the purpose of the brand. And so that's what we're looking at. How do you take unlock what is the unbelievable power of planet Earth to help generate food for future generations. That's really what we're trying to do. And so that is, very, very near and dear to my heart. It's exciting to wake up every day and feel like you're trying to do your bit to make the world better. So that's kind of what attracted me to it. And food is something, all of us consume. One of the reasons I got into food marketing is I think it's really fascinating what makes people choose the foods that they choose, and how you change habits and things like that. So it's, from a marketing standpoint, it's a really incredible challenge too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you're kind of building a brand for a company like that, which is, kind of a little bit technical, not so easy for people to understand, what are some things, or like what are some challenges that you face as, someone who's trying to tell that story?
That's a great question. So yeah, it is food tech, right? And people get, there's a level of, well, I don't want technology in my food, but on the other hand, what's interesting is Gen Z and younger audiences actually are okay with technology in their food because they know that we have to find, new innovations. So you're right, it is a complicated story. So part of our challenge is, how do we convey the story in a way that people, can understand it? So that's a big part of my job, is what's important to communicate, what's not important to communicate. The other piece of it is, at the end of the day, recognizing first and foremost, it's food. If it isn't delicious, all the sustainability in the world and all of the health stats in the world aren't going to matter. People might try you once because it's a novelty, but they're not going to come back. So we've been very focused on making sure our food is incredibly delicious. And then we have all the, reasons to back it up. So it's almost like if you eat it and you love it, you would say, well, why wouldn't I switch if this is better for me and better for the environment? So that's the story we're trying to tell. The third thing I would say is connecting people to the emotion, because food is very emotional, right? And we have a pretty incredible origin story that I'm always trying to get people to connect to. I mean, you think about NASA and Yellowstone National Park coming together. It's a pretty incredible story of nature and science, which is something we all want to believe in. So tapping into that insight around what creates optimism in the world, and how do we, in the face of something that's so daunting like climate change, how do we still help people make choices that are going to improve things, but also help them feel like they're making a difference. So we really think about optimism a lot. That's the emotion that, whenever we tell our story, that's the emotion that people play back. So it's tapping into that as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think, overall, just your journey as a whole and your career, it's super inspiring, and it's just amazing. And so I also wanted to ask you, like, kind of the last question. What advice would you have for young women who are just starting out their careers or interested in marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my advice would be, really think about, what your passions are. So if you're interested in marketing, I think, try to get to it as soon as you can. My journey took a little bit longer, but, get to it, find opportunities where you can learn all the different aspects of marketing. And that's really important. People think of marketing just as, oh, it's your logo, or it's your branding, or it's your advertising. It's actually about growth. Your job as a marketer is to grow the business. So you have to understand all of the dynamics around that. So make sure you really build a solid foundation in understanding all of those things. Because yes, you can have, there are brands that are overnight, quote, branding successes, but unless you can help consistently grow the business, that's going to be hard. So that's one. Really, get some deep understanding around how to understand consumers, I think, is super important. And really look for those opportunities where you can jump in and make a difference. It might be in a small role, but you can kind of start to grow from there. So really, and then, find a company, hopefully, that can align with your own personal values, because if you can find that opportunity as early as possible in your career, you will be excited about doing the work. You will be excited about, what you're helping to drive. So figuring out your passions, figuring out your purpose, and then really building a solid foundation, in business, in marketing skills, in consumer understanding, and culture. Culture is another big piece, of really staying connected to culture, because ultimately what you're doing is connecting to people. And if you can find a way to do that, via things that are important to them, not just, talking at them, but having a conversation and a dialogue with consumers. That's when, that was one of the powerful things about Like a Girl. Like, we put something out, but it generated so much feedback and response, and engagement that the conversation just kept going, and people picked it up and wanted to do things in their communities and wanted to, change things in the classroom. And there were so many, things that were ripple effects of that. And that's what great, advertising, great marketing can do.
Wow. Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you, Tanya, for having me. It was great talking about going down memory lane a little bit and sharing my thoughts and experiences with you. And look forward to seeing this come out. Thank you.